If I asked you to name an extinct snake, I would bet many of you would say Titanoboa, and I can't blame you. It is after all one of, if not the largest snakes to have ever slithered across our planet. But today this giant is going to be placed in an utterly alien world, one where it is no longer the top predator. G'day everybody, I hope you all are well, and as we normally break down these speculative videos, we have our three sections, this being environmental suitability, dietary suitability, and resistance to threats and competition. These will all be scored out of 10 before being summed up into an ultimate survival score, and also there is some Spec Evo in this video. As always, if you enjoy, make sure to like and subscribe so I don't end up extinct like the animals in these videos. Anyways mates, let us get the ball rolling with the Titanoboa's breakdown. Over 58 million years ago, long after the dinosaurs had vanished, something enormous slid across the swampy rivers of what is now northern Colombia. Titanoboa, one of the largest snakes ever discovered, and yes, its name literally translates to Titanic boa. What a real shocker there. Titanoboa is one of those prehistoric animals that everyone seems to know, even people who are not particularly interested in prehistory, and that is probably because humanity tends to fall into one of two groups. On one hand, people who absolutely love snakes, and on the other, people who would sprint into traffic to avoid one. Either way, the idea of a snake as long as a school bus tends to stick in the mind of a person. But let us go through what this giant actually was. Titanoboa stretched to around 12 to 13 meters or 39 to 42 feet in length. Despite its insane length, this snake wasn't nearly as heavy as people might expect. Snakes can be quite muscular, sure, but they aren't built like crocodilians. Even at over a metric ton, Titanoboa ends up being comparable to a very large salty that's only half its length. Even then, a ton in weight may be generous, as some studies have placed it around 800 kilograms or 1763 pounds. Fossil discoveries of this snake has told us something very important. It was likely very aquatic. On land, it likely moves slower than Garfield does on his Monday morning, but in the water, rivers, swamps, flooded forests, it would have operated right at home. Still moving, very slow, albeit faster than on land, but again, even large semi-aquatic snakes like the anaconda don't swim all that quickly. There's also been a bit of debate whether or not Titanoboa could properly constrict its prey. Some argue because of its diet and overall size, it may not have been able to perform a classic constriction. This is somewhat debated, but for the sake of this snake, I will be operating of the opinion that it could indeed constrict. In relation to its paleobiology and diet, well, Titanoboa lived in one of the hottest, wettest rainforest environments ever recorded. Warm water, thick humidity, basically a steam room full of animals, perfect conditions for a giant reptile. But what did it actually hunt? Well, for years people imagined Titanoboa swallowing crocodiles whole and crushing giant turtles, but more recent research paints a completely different picture. According to studies by Jason Head et al., Titanoboa's skull structure indicates a strong preference for fish, likely including massive lungfish and hefty freshwater species of the Paleocene. Despite its mainly piscivore diet, that doesn't necessarily mean it would ignore everything else. Juvenile crocodiles and turtles were certainly on the menu, but fully grown crocodilomorphs such as Tyrannosaurus, which could measure 6 meters or 19 feet in length and weigh over half a ton, could pose too much trouble. Researcher Alex Hastings even stated that the biggest of these species would have been a bit much for the 42 snake to handle. Still, within its swampy ecosystem, Titanoboa reigned as an apex predator. No dominating mammals existed yet, crocs were still quite a bit smaller, and the giant turtles like the carbonemes weren't exactly snake killers themselves. Titanoboa essentially owned every river that it entered. Now, before we drop Titanoboa into the Cretaceous, we need to understand what the late Cretaceous, specifically the Hell Creek ecosystem, actually looked like. Well, scientists describe it as a warm, humid, seasonal floodplain. The temperature of this environment ranged quite a bit, with high-end summer temperatures reaching around 35 degrees Celsius or 95 degrees Fahrenheit. Although cooler months would occur, it would still be a warm, suitable temperature for our giant snake. Those hotter months would be critical in allowing the snake to settle in within its chosen territory. But what did the landscape actually consist of? Well, the environment was dominated by meandering rivers, wetlands, conifer forest, magnolias, and flowering plants, as well as much more. The water bodies that did exist would be critical for the snake's survival, providing opportunities to travel, hide, hide and hunt. I would rate the Titanoboa a solid 7 out of 10 when it comes to environmental survivability. It would be able to acclimate into the ecosystem quite well, especially if it was dropped off during the hotter summer months. But now we actually have to look into what actual animals it would be surrounded by, and to put it mildly, the Cretaceous menu is a mixed bag. Some options are easy snacks, and many others not so much. But let us go through the tougher prey options first. Kicking it off, we have the crown jewels of the Cretaceous danger category in relation to herbivores, and these were the ceratopsians, particularly Triceratops and Torosaurus. If an animal had a universal stay away symbol, it would have been painted on the side of these animals. These ceratopsians could reach 9 meters or 30 feet in length and upwards of 10 tons. It was armed like a medieval siege engine. Its brown horns, each stretching over a meter long, were perfectly shaped for intraspecific conflict as well as defending itself against predators. Its frill also functioned as a natural shield, protecting the vulnerable neck and shoulder regions. Now, when we consider the Titanoboa, I think it should be more than obvious that this snake would avoid this herbivore at all costs. Being so low down to the ground, it would be stomped on before it even have to face those horns. Then we have the giant Edmontosaurus. This hadrosaur could reach 12 meters or 39 feet in length and routinely weighed in at over 5 tons, but its maximum size estimates only continue to grow, with it potentially weighing over 12 tons. More importantly, they weren't just passive mobs. They lived in social herds and had the sheer muscle to turn a defensive charge into a catastrophic collision for any predator standing in its way. While juveniles were absolutely vulnerable to predation, a healthy adult Edmontosaur would be immune from any predation attempts from this snake. And if Edmontosaurus was a risky target, Ankylosaurus was an absolute nightmare. Everything about this animal seemed engineered to keep a predator at bay. Stretching around 6 meters or 20 feet long and weighing close to 5 tons, Ankylosaurus was effectively, well, a living shield. Its body was encased in thick osteoderms that acted as natural armor plating, and its low, wide posture made it extremely difficult for predators to flip or manipulate. Of course, its club tail was more than capable of swinging at bone-breaking forces. Titanoboa would absolutely have zero business attempting to subdue a creature like this. However, on the smaller end, we have the ornithomimids like Struthiomimus and Ornithomimus. We also have Pachycephalosaurus and Oviraptorosaurs. These dinosaurs would be large enough to fill up the snake, but small enough not to pose too much of a physical threat. These dinosaurs, however, mainly relied on speed and the ability to vanish into dense foliage to survive. So to Titanoboa, these smaller dinosaurs would act almost like a floating bubble. If you could catch them, then yeah, you could pop them. But you'd have to catch them first. As established, the Titanoboa was not all that quick, especially on land. This puts quite a bit of doubt in its ability to catch these targets. In large, it would mainly have to rely on aquatic strikes like modern day anacondas or crocodilians. Where Titanoboa would find the most success in the Cretaceous is in the waterways. Aquatic prey more closely matched the animals it evolved to actually hunt. Ancient sturgeon would patrol rivers as large armored bottom feeders capable of reaching several feet in length, perfect targets for an ambush predator lurking in the murky shadows. Fish, like members of the bowfin lineage, were long-bodied, muscular, and agile, exactly the type of prey Titanoboa was specialized in overpowering with sheer strength. There was also the gar lineage, which added further opportunity. Evidently, the water would be its comfort zone, having far more familiar and far safer prey options than, let's say, attempting to take down a Triceratops, or well, taking on any multi-ton nightmare that walked on land. So when it comes to diet, I think that this titan of a snake would struggle quite a bit. But with the aquatic prey around, along with the availability of juvenile dinosaurs, I think it earns a dietary suitability score of 5 out of 10. The Hells Creek ecosystem was not only just filled with potential prey options, but it was also crowded with predators that would make life extremely complicated for any newcomer. Titanoboa would be no exception. It would not be just simply slipping into an empty niche, it would be entering a landscape ruled by fast, dangerous, and efficient carnivores. If Dakotaraptor existed as originally described, it was not your average dromaeosaur. It would stretch around 5 meters or 16 feet in length and weigh over 200 kilograms or 440 pounds in weight. This raptor was evidently built for some serious work. While not a direct threat to a Titanoboa as it mainly existed in the water, it would absolutely compete for the same terrestrial game, and it would not hesitate to harass a feeding snake if it smelled an easy meal. Then we have a surprising entrance in our Royal Rumble, this being Nanotyrannus, and as of now I can confidently state that yes, Nanotyrannus was an actual species that lived in this ecosystem. It likely acted as a middle-of-the-ladder pursuit predator, being long-legged, relatively lightweight, and capable of fast directional movement. Unlike the full-grown tyrants, this animal did not have as powerful of a bite, likely chasing down faster prey options, targeting younger herbivores, and exploited any window of weakness within the ecosystem. Titanoboa would have actually had quite a bit to fear from this theropod. This is mainly because they were of similar sizes and the nana would have been quicker on its feet. That being said, if this snake could get a good strike in and a quick constriction, it might be able to ensure they would not get critically injured if the two were in a direct conflict. And then we have Tyrannosaurus rex, the undisputed, unquestioned, unchallenged apex predator of the late Cretaceous, North America. This animal was not just big, it was a unit. A fully mature individual could reach over 12 meters or 39 feet in length, and they commonly exceeded 7 tons in weight. The largest specimens were even pushing into the 11 to 12 ton territory. Titanoboa may have been enormous for modern snake standards, but would look comparatively slender beside this walking fortress. I mean, come on, the T-Rex evolved for this world. Its skull was over 1.5 meters long. It supported a bite force that exceeded 40,000 newtons, being the strongest of any known land animal. Its teeth were also slightly serrated, but were still able to crush bone. Add into that forward-facing eyes, exceptional vision, powerful olfactory senses, and the potential to have high cognitive abilities, then yeah, you have an animal that can hunt with precision and overwhelming force. A fully grown or even subadult T-Rex would view this snake as a prey option. Near riverbanks or carcasses, the snake's greatest survival strategy would be simple: avoid the king of the dinosaurs. When it comes to the Titanoboa's resistance to threats and competition, I think that it actually would struggle quite badly when it comes to the terrestrial landscape. Still, it gets saved because of one big reason: it was mainly aquatic. I think it earns a 5 out of 10. It really had to remain in the water to ensure its own survival. Now, with all that being established, I think it's time to get into the speculative evolution of these snakes. But warning be known, I drafted this up myself and I'm certainly no Pablo Picasso. The first on our list is known as Titanoboa thalassarcus, also known as the coastal boa. Rather than following the Titanoboa's traditional path of overwhelming size, this lineage took a bit of a different route, being a refinement of its gigantism. This snake is far more specialized for marine life, but checks in at a solid 10 meters or 32 feet in length and roughly 300 kilograms or 661 pounds in weight. Still big, but not ecosystem altering. Its body possesses a paddle-like tail that provides propulsion through coastal and swampy ecosystems. The lungs are elongated and partitioned, allowing for extended dives while maintaining buoyancy control. The nostrils can even seal shut, and salt glands help to process and excrete fluids, being key upgrades required for partly living in the ocean. This species would almost become exclusively fish eaters. Instead of constricting large prey, it uses rapid strikes and jaw pressure to immobilize fish, turtles, and juvenile marine reptiles. Its musculature emphasizes flexibility rather than crushing force, meaning it can weave through reefs, mangroves, and forests with surprising agility. Ecologically, Thalassarcus controls small to large fish populations, preventing sick or slow individuals from accumulating. It would also steal carcasses from marine scavengers where opportunities would allow. When exposed to high salinity levels, such as when entering the ocean's salty or brackish waters, its pigmentation changes from a swampy green to an ocean blue and black stripe pattern. Specialized chromatophores in the skin respond to changes when the snake moves from fresh waters into saltwater environments. However, in the ocean environments, apex predators such as large sharks or mosasaurs would target this species when they entered open waters. It isn't the top of the oceanic food web, but it has the ability to go into both fresh and salty water. Then we have the Oz-inspired ambush predator, being Titanoboa arborealis, more commonly being known as the drop serpent. If the Titanoboa represents raw power, this species represents patience. Arborealis evolved in dense semi-tropical forests where climbing ability mattered more than mass. These adults just reach 5 meters or 16 feet in length and weigh in at around 100 kilograms or 220 pounds. This being relatively light and muscular compared to the OG Titanoboa. Its body is built for arboreal life: long prehensile tail, reinforced belly scales for gripping bark, and exceptionally flexible ribs allowing for the snake to wrap around branches like a biological hook. Its camouflage mimics that of peeling bark, helping it to vanish in the canopy. However, this arboreal lifestyle came at the cost of its swimming efficiency, but I think it more than made up for it with its signature behavior, this being ambush diving. Rather than chasing prey or waiting for prey to step on it, this snake waits motionless above game trails, watering holes, or fallen logs. When a suitable prey option passes beneath, mainly consisting of small mammals, reptiles, or small dinosaurs, it takes a place straight out of the drop bear's handbook. It drops from above, above, using gravity to accelerate its strike. Its impact alone can stun prey before it lunges, using its sharp recurved teeth that were purposely built for taking on larger prey than itself. However, it cannot safely target extremely large or awkwardly shaped animals, but it doesn't need to. Ecologically, it occupies the role of a sit-and-wait arboreal apex. Raptors and larger snakes would be the main competitors and predators of this species. All in all, the dinosaurs would have to start being wary of above. But now it is time to go through our ultimate survival scenario. So introducing groups of the OG Titanoboas into the Cretaceous would be interesting to say the least. The first priority for any animal in an ecosystem would be securing a suitable habitat and settling in. Fortunately for these snakes, the Hell's Creek offers plenty. Its warm, humid climate, dense vegetation, slow-moving rivers, and sprawling floodplains would feel almost tailor-made for this Paleocene giant. Instead of venturing into open lands, this species would concentrate around lakes, swampy forests, and river deltas. These were being places where concealment, deep water, and ambush angles were abundant. These environments would provide both protection and predictable prey pathways, allowing Titanoboa to settle in without immediately drawing attention from larger predators. Once settled in, the Titanoboa would begin to adjust its feeding strategy. Contrary to what you may have thought starting off in this video, I don't believe that dinosaurs would be on its main menu. Instead, the giant snake would exploit the aquatic backbone of the Hell's Creek. Fish relatives, turtles, and crocodilians would be the bulk of its diet. Titanoboa's body strength and aquatic maneuverability would make it an efficient ambush predator within these waterways, allowing it to thrive without ever needing to confront the massive herbivores that defined the Hell's Creek reputation. But in a scenario where a riverbed goes dry or it needs to hunt a larger prey option, such as an adult trike, anky, or a montosaur, then it would likely just get stomped and tossed to the side. Sorry to the snake, but I can't think of a scenario where it's taking a win. However, a portion of its diet could definitely be filled up with juveniles that get too close to the water's edge, as well as the faster ornithomimids, oviraptors, and pachycephalosaurs. With a rapid strike, it could quickly constrict and consume these smaller, safer prey options within the comfort of the water. However, an ecological honeymoon would never last forever. This ecosystem's waters are not unoccupied. The thing is, the adult crocodilomorphs did not quite stack up to the Titanoboa's size. These giant snakes would likely intimidate these crocs based off size alone, but there would likely be some scenarios where the two would be contesting over basking sites, nesting areas, and access to deeper pools where larger fish existed. Most conflicts would end in avoidance rather than combat, resulting in subtle habitat partitioning. Titanoboa would likely have favoured shaded backwaters and crocodilians dominating exposed riverbanks. Above the waterline, the real problem would be present, this being Tyrannosaurus rex. While Titanoboa would rarely be targeted intentionally as a result of spending a majority of its time hidden underwater, opportunistic encounters would be inevitable. A basking snake could be caught on a sandbar or dragged into the open by a struggling prey item, where it could become an easy target from a hungry T-Rex. A single bite, actually you know what, forget a bite, a single stomp from an 8-ton predator would be lethal. To be honest, even smaller theropods like the Dakotaraptor or Nanotyrannus could definitely harass young or even adult Titanoboas, forcing them into deeper waters or thicker vegetation. That's not to say an adult Titanoboa couldn't defend itself against a Dakotaraptor or young Nanotyrannus, but it would still be vulnerable. This predation pressure would dramatically shape the Titanoboa's behavior, where individuals would become more aquatic, spending a majority of their lives submerged, surfacing only to bask under dense canopy cover. Some would even shift their behaviors to be further inland, nesting where it would be inaccessible for predation attempts. Hatchlings and juveniles, being already vulnerable, would suffer extremely high mortality rates, becoming prey to everything from fish to crocodilomorphs to even carnivorous dinosaurs. Only a small fraction would ever reach adulthood. Over time, Titanoboas would likely stabilize into specialized ecological niches, being large elusive fish-focused ambush predators that really interact with the ecosystem's dominant megafauna. They would not topple the ceratopsians, challenge the hadrosaurs, or compete with T-Rex. Instead, they would suddenly reshape the aquatic food web. However, their long-term success would be capped by two major limitations. A 1-ton aquatic snake requires substantial calories, and droughts or fluctuating river systems could starve populations. Slow reproduction, exposed nests, and vulnerable growth stages would mean population recovery would be slow following environmental stresses or predator surges. So if it did truly survive, then it would go on to evolve into the coastal boa and the drop serpent, but its ultimate survival score does place it at 17 out of 30. Although that is technically a passing mark, I'm not sure if it would actually survive. It would have to endure, reproduce, and establish solid populations, but only through by staying hidden, specialized, and cautious. In a land ruled by dinosaurs, this giant snake would simply have to find a way to live beneath it all. And with that, we have reached the end of the video, and I hope you've all enjoyed. As always, make sure to like and subscribe, and comment down below what you'd like to see next. I mean, this video was inspired from a comment I saw, so keep that in mind. Anyways, I'll catch you all in the next video. See ya, mates.